Evan Carter stood outside the towering glass doors of Alyssa Green's penthouse, hesitating as the muffled hum of laughter and music seeped through the walls. Parties had never been his scene, and yet something, a mix of curiosity and obligation, had drawn him here. He adjusted the collar of his shirt, ran a hand through his messy brown hair, and took a slow breath. Tonight, he told himself, he would simply observe. That was all. Just watch. The lobby was swarming with people, laughing, mingling, and holding glasses that caught the soft lighting in golden glints. Evan felt a familiar pang of anxiety as he navigated through the crowd, noting the confident ease with which others moved. He caught sight of Alyssa in the distance, animated and commanding attention, effortlessly managing conversations. Evan admired her energy from afar. She seemed to radiate a magnetism he had always envied. As he wandered further, a deep voice called his name. Evan. Over here. He turned to see Miles Thompson, a friend from a previous college event, waving with a broad, welcoming smile. Miles had always carried a confidence that Evan struggled to match, a charisma that made him both intimidating and magnetic. Tonight, his presence was a welcome relief. Miles, Evan said, allowing himself a small smile. I wasn't sure I'd find anyone I knew. You'll always find me, Miles replied smoothly. Come on, I want you to meet someone. His words held a playful lilt, but there was something in his gaze, warm, attentive, and slightly mischievous, that made Evan's stomach twist in ways he didn't fully understand. Evan followed him through the crowded room, noting the diverse array of faces, the shifting patterns of conversation, the way light reflected off champagne flutes. Miles led him to a tall, dark-skinned man standing casually near a set of shelves lined with books and art pieces. Evan, this is Jasper Okafor, Miles introduced, his hand briefly brushing Evan's shoulder in a gesture that made him acutely aware of the contact. Nice to meet you, Evan said, extending his hand, but Jasper didn't immediately take it. Instead, he gave Evan a slow, appraising look, his dark eyes sharp yet playful. Miles tells me you're new to this kind of scene, Jasper said, his voice smooth, laced with amusement. Something like that, Evan replied, unsure whether to laugh or fidget. He felt suddenly conspicuous, as though every movement was being silently evaluated. Jasper smiled faintly, leaning casually against the shelf. Don't worry, he said. We're not that scary. Just, unpredictable. There was a subtle challenge in his tone, an unspoken invitation to step out of comfort zones. Evan's pulse quickened. The three of them moved through the room together, weaving between clusters of guests. Miles and Jasper spoke in easy camaraderie, finishing each other's sentences in a way that suggested a long familiarity. Evan observed quietly, noting their synchronized gestures, the playful banter, and the way their laughter seemed to light up the space around them. Despite himself, Evan felt drawn in. There was something magnetic about the dynamic between the two men, something that made him both nervous and strangely exhilarated. He had always considered himself cautious, deliberate, restrained, but being here, in their presence, felt like standing at the edge of something thrilling and dangerous. At one point, Miles leaned slightly closer to Evan. You want to see a part of the apartment most people never get to? He asked, his voice low enough that Jasper's teasing smile was the only witness. Evan hesitated. Curiosity warred with apprehension, but the twinkle in Miles' eyes was disarming. Sure, Evan managed, trying to steady his voice. They moved toward a side corridor, the noise of the main room fading into distant beats of music and muffled laughter. The space felt private, intimate, different from the vibrant chaos behind them. Miles opened a door, revealing a dimly lit room furnished with plush couches and warm, golden light from small lamps. The air smelled faintly of incense, and Evan noticed how the quiet seemed heavier here, charged. Jasper leaned against the doorway, studying Evan with that same calculating curiosity. Not many get invited back here, he said casually, though his tone carried an unspoken weight. Usually, people just watch from the sidelines. Evan swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the electricity in the air, the way shadows played across their faces, the subtle energy that seemed to hum between the three of them. He realized, with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, that tonight might unfold in ways he had never expected. Miles took a seat on one of the couches, patting the space next to him. "Relax," he said, with a reassuring yet charged undertone. "No one's judging. We just talk." Evan hesitated, then sat down, trying to focus on casual conversation but finding it impossible to ignore the tension. Every glance, every half-smile, every slight movement seemed deliberate, orchestrated. Jasper moved closer, leaning on the armrest across from Evan, his gaze unwavering. The room was small enough that silence between words felt loud, filled with meaning. "Why'd you come tonight, really?" Jasper asked after a while, his voice low, probing. "Not just for Alyssa's party, I mean. You seem out of place." Evan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I guess I wanted to see something different. Maybe meet new people. Experience something I don't usually allow myself." His voice sounded more uncertain than he intended, betraying a part of him he hadn't admitted to anyone else. Miles smiled knowingly. "That's the spirit. Sometimes you have to step into the unknown." Evan nodded, a flutter of nervous excitement in his chest. Something about this room, about these two men, suggested that the unknown was closer than he had anticipated. He realized that by following Miles and Jasper here, he had crossed an invisible line, one that promised to change the course of his night, maybe even his life. The sound of distant laughter from the main party reached them through the walls, reminder of the world beyond this intimate space. But for now, all Evan could focus on were the two men before him, their presence magnetic and unsettling, their intentions unreadable. And in that charged silence, Evan understood something he had never quite admitted to himself: he was exactly where he was meant to be, even if he didn't know what would happen next. And just like that, the night took on a different rhythm, a rhythm that pulsed with suspense, curiosity, and the promise of choices that could not be undone. The room seemed smaller now, the shadows folding into corners as the warm glow of the lamps created pockets of intimacy. Evan Carter shifted on the couch, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, noticing the subtle difference in energy from the main party. Miles Thompson leaned back casually, one arm draped over the couch, while Jasper Okafor remained across from him, his posture relaxed but alert. The air was thick with anticipation, unspoken yet undeniable. "So," Miles began, his voice smooth, almost teasing, "how's your night been so far? Are you enjoying yourself?" Evan hesitated, choosing his words with care. "It's different," he admitted. "I wasn't sure what to expect. Parties like this can be overwhelming." He looked at them both, trying to gauge their reactions, and realized he was reading far too much into the smallest gestures. Jasper's eyes flicked toward him, sharp but playful. "Different can be good, though," he said. "It usually means something's changing." The faint curve of his lips suggested amusement, and Evan felt a sudden, inexplicable awareness of how close he was to danger, or something thrillingly new. Miles chuckled softly. "Jasper's right. Tonight isn't about the ordinary." His gaze lingered on Evan for a moment longer than necessary, warm and compelling. "It's about exploration. Experiencing things you usually wouldn't allow yourself." Evan felt his chest tighten. He'd always thought of himself as careful, measured, cautious. Yet here, in this dimly lit room, something about their presence loosened the constraints he had long imposed on himself. Every glance, every subtle movement, seemed to draw him further into uncharted territory. Jasper leaned forward slightly, resting an elbow on his knee. "You don't have to explain yourself," he said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial. "We can just be here. See what happens." There was a challenge in his words, playful but with a serious undertone, and Evan felt a shiver of anticipation run down his spine. The room fell into a brief silence, broken only by the distant thrum of music and the occasional laughter from the party outside. It was intimate, almost suffocating, and Evan noticed how acutely aware he was of every detail: the warmth of the lamp on his skin, the faint scent of cologne lingering in the air, the subtle rustle of clothing as Miles shifted. "I have to admit," Evan said finally, his voice quiet, "I wasn't expecting to be here like this. Not with both of you." He glanced between them, and a nervous tension crept into his words. Miles smiled knowingly. "Neither were you expecting much, and yet, here you are. That says something, doesn't it? His eyes held a warmth that made Evan simultaneously reassured and unervingly aware of his own vulnerability. Jasper's smile widened slightly. Vulnerability isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the key to understanding yourself. Don't you think? His voice was soft, yet there was an edge to it, an invitation to explore thoughts Evan hadn't allowed himself to entertain. Evan shifted again, unsure whether to respond, but the weight of their gaze made it difficult to look away. There was a rhythm to their conversation, a subtle push and pull, and he realized that the dynamic between Miles and Jasper was drawing him in, testing boundaries he hadn't even acknowledged existed. Miles leaned closer, lowering his voice. You ever wonder what it would be like to step completely outside of your comfort zone? To let yourself feel things you usually keep tucked away? Evan swallowed hard. I think about it, he admitted. More than I probably should. He could feel his pulse quicken, the warmth of nervous energy spreading through him. Every word, every glance, seemed loaded with unspoken meaning. Jasper tilted his head slightly, studying Evan. That honesty, it's refreshing. Most people hide behind polite smiles or awkward deflections. Not you. There was a weight in his words, an acknowledgement that felt strangely intimate. Evan felt exposed, yet safe in an unfamiliar way. The conversation shifted subtly then, from casual observation to teasing banter. Miles made a small joke about Evan's hesitance, and Jasper added a playful comment that made Evan laugh despite himself. The sound of his own laughter, light and tentative, surprised him. It had been a long time since he had allowed himself such openness, and he noticed how quickly the tension in his body began to ebb, replaced by a growing curiosity. You're different, Jasper said softly after a pause. Not in a bad way. Just, aware. You notice things. You feel things. That's rare. Evan's gaze flicked to him, searching, questioning. Aware of what? He asked. Jasper smiled faintly. Of yourself, mostly. And of the possibilities around you. His words hung in the air, charged, leaving Evan to wonder if he fully understood their meaning. Miles leaned back, crossing an arm over his chest. Sometimes the possibilities aren't obvious until someone nudges you in the right direction. His tone was casual, but the implication was clear. Evan felt a jolt of anticipation, a fluttering in his stomach that he couldn't ignore. The room's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, the quiet moments stretching longer, charged with tension. Evan noticed the small details, the way Jasper's fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, the way Miles' eyes flicked toward him when he thought he wasn't looking. Every movement seemed deliberate, designed to draw him in, and he felt the magnetic pull of their attention. Evan's thoughts raced. He was aware of boundaries, of propriety, of the life he had outside this room. Yet the warmth, the attention, the intrigue of these two men created a temptation that gnawed at his resolve. Every instinct screamed caution, but another, quieter voice whispered curiosity, an invitation to explore feelings he had long suppressed. Miles shifted again, a half-smile tugging at his lips. I think you're enjoying yourself more than you're letting on, he said. Evan's laugh came, light and nervous. Maybe a little, he admitted. The words felt dangerous, liberating, and somehow inevitable. Jasper's eyes softened, but there remained a flicker of playful challenge. Good. That's the first step. Letting yourself feel. Letting yourself wonder what might happen next. Evan's chest tightened, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The room felt smaller, more intimate, yet the possibilities seemed endless. He realized that by staying here, in this dimly lit corner of the apartment with Miles and Jasper, he had entered a space where the familiar rules no longer applied. And though he didn't know what would happen, he knew one thing with certainty: this night, this room, these two men, were going to change something in him forever. The faint laughter and music from the main party continued in the background, distant yet persistent, a reminder that the outside world remained oblivious to the quiet, charged tension unfolding here. Evan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of anticipation settle around him, and realized that the real story had only just begun. The dimly lit room seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, quiet except for the faint hum of music from the party outside. Evan Carter leaned back against the couch, trying to steady his breathing, but the presence of Miles Thompson and Jasper Okafor made it nearly impossible. Their proximity, the ease of their gestures, the subtle glances that lingered just a fraction too long, all of it created a tension that Evan could neither ignore nor resist. Miles shifted slightly, stretching an arm along the back of the couch, letting it hover near Evan's shoulder without quite touching. "You know," he said, his tone light but deliberate, "there's a different kind of energy in this room. You can feel it, can't you?" Evan swallowed hard, his eyes flicking toward him. I feel it," he admitted, voice quiet, almost a whisper. The admission felt dangerous, exposing a vulnerability he usually kept hidden. Jasper, seated across from them, leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Energy's everything," he said. "It tells you when something matters. When someone matters." His words lingered, charged with double meaning, and Evan felt a strange warmth creep through his chest that he tried to distract himself by observing the room, the muted glow of the lamps, the soft shadows folding into corners, the way Miles' fingers drummed lightly against the couch. But every glance he stole at either of the men drew him deeper into a subtle, magnetic pull. He realized that in this small, intimate space, he was becoming aware of things he had long ignored in himself: desire, curiosity, and the thrill of the unknown. Miles leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "Sometimes, you just need to let go of what you think is safe and see what happens. Don't you agree?" Evan's stomach twisted. He wanted to nod, wanted to take the leap that Miles was offering, yet a voice in the back of his mind whispered caution. He had never allowed himself to cross lines like this. And yet, the thought of retreating felt heavier than the risk itself. Jasper's expression softened, his tone gentle but teasing. "Evan, it's okay to feel conflicted. That's normal. But don't mistake hesitation for inability. You're capable of more than you think." His words were both reassurance and provocation, and Evan found himself leaning forward unconsciously, drawn by the warmth and intensity in Jasper's eyes. The conversation turned playful then, subtle flirtation threading between them. Miles joked about Evan's nervous habits, the way he wrung his hands when thinking, the slight blush that surfaced whenever Jasper spoke directly to him. Evan laughed despite himself, feeling a strange thrill at being observed so keenly, so attentively. Jasper joined in the banter, his comments light but laced with intimacy. "You're far too aware of yourself," he teased. "It's endearing, in a way that makes me curious." His gaze lingered, unblinking, and Evan felt the tension coil tighter in his chest, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Evan realized he was acutely conscious of every small detail: the brush of air as Miles shifted, the warmth of Jasper's presence, the low timbre of their voices. He had never felt such an intensity, and it was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. It forced him to confront feelings he had buried: desire, curiosity, and a daring fascination with crossing boundaries he had long respected. "I've never been in a situation like this before," Evan admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "It's intense." Miles' expression softened, his smile reassuring yet charged. "That's because it is. But that's not a bad thing. Feeling intensity like this means you're alive, Evan. It means you're awake to possibilities." Jasper's gaze never wavered. "And possibilities," he said slowly, "don't reveal themselves if you're too scared to notice them. You have to lean in, even a little." His words were a whisper now, but they carried weight, pressing against Evan's resolve. Evan's thoughts raced. He knew the boundaries he was skirting, lines that, if crossed, would change everything about his life. Yet he was painfully aware of the pull, the temptation, the magnetic connection with these two men. Every instinct screamed caution, but another voice, soft, insistent, whispered that sometimes the thrill was worth the risk. Miles moved slightly closer, enough for Evan to feel the warmth radiating from him. "You don't have to do anything," he said gently, though the closeness was charged with meaning. "Just being here, noticing. Feeling. That's enough for now." Evan's chest tightened. The words should have reassured him, but instead, they magnified the tension, highlighting the vulnerability he felt in the presence of both Miles and Jasper. He realized that the room had become a liminal space, somewhere between safety and surrender, curiosity and recklessness. Jasper leaned back, his smile playful yet intimate. "Curiosity is powerful," he said. "It can lead you to discoveries about yourself you never imagined." His eyes sparkled with something unreadable, a combination of encouragement and challenge, and Evan felt the pull of temptation stronger than ever. Time seemed to stretch in the room. Moments felt heavier, charged with meaning, each glance and gesture amplified. Evan became aware of the subtle rhythm of their breathing, the way their bodies angled slightly toward him, the faint sounds of movement in the quiet. It was exhilarating, suffocating, intoxicating. All at once Evan closed his eyes briefly, trying to gather his thoughts, but the energy between Miles and Jasper was inescapable. He realized with startling clarity that he was standing at a threshold, on the edge of something irreversible. The tension wasn't merely physical, it was emotional, psychological, a test of desire and self-control. Miles' voice broke the silence softly. "Evan, whatever happens tonight, just know that you can explore this at your own pace. No pressure, no judgment." His words were gentle, yet the unspoken implication hung heavily in the air. Jasper's eyes met Evan's, unwavering. "But don't ignore what you want either. Desire is nothing to be ashamed of. It's natural. Real." Evan's pulse raced. He had never been confronted with such a mixture of challenge and comfort, teasing and reassurance. The tension was almost unbearable, the energy in the room thick and charged. He felt as though the world outside, the party, the city, the familiar life he knew, had dissolved entirely, leaving only this intimate space, these two men, and the choices he would have to make. That he exhaled slowly, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation coiling within him. One thing was certain, the night had already shifted into something transformative. And as he met the steady, magnetic gaze of Miles and the playful, challenging look of Jasper, he understood that whatever came next would be far from ordinary.